St. Thomas. This week's hymn is unique in that it is the only hymn in the hymnal that both the text and the tune appear twice. The tune appears twice exactly, and the text appears again in another hymn in a slightly different version. And I'll talk more about that a little later. But if you're ever at pub night trivia and they ask which hymn occurs both text and tune twice in the Episcopal Hymnal 1982, you'll know the answer after watching this. So the hymn title is Praise to the Living God. And there are 3 stanzas. And the text is a paraphrase of the 12th century text by the Jewish philosopher Moses Maimonides. I can show you a picture of him here. Let's see. There he is. And he wrote down basically the Jewish articles of faith at that time, similar to, I guess you could say, to our creed. And then in the 15th century, they were made into verses. And there were, I think, how many? Originally 12 stanzas. So that text in Hebrew gets passed down and becomes sort of a core part of the Jewish liturgy. And then in the 18th century, this guy named Meyer Lyon, or Meyer Leone, was the cantor at the Great Synagogue in London. He was also a famous opera tenor. And here's a picture of the Great Synagogue in London. It must have been an amazing space. So a Christian poet and hymn writer named Thomas Olivers heard Leone sing this tune and asked him about the text and asked him to write down the tune. So Olivers then goes and takes the Yigdal, this 12th century statement of articles of faith, of Jewish faith, and turns it into rhyming meter and Christianizes it. And it becomes a very popular hymn. That is the other hymn that's in our hymnal at 401. It's called The God of Abram Praise. Same tune as this one. And the tune name is Leoni, named for the cantor, the 18th century cantor in London. The story gets complicated further when in the late 19th century, a Jewish rabbi in Rochester, New York, approached a Unitarian minister there who was a friend of his and asked him to make a version of the Yigdal to be sung to this tune, but that was not Christianized, so that both Jewish and Christian congregations could sing it together. Early ecumenism, or interfaith, I should say. And so that is, the result of that is the hymn we are talking about today, hymn 372, Praise to the Living God. If you scan both hymns, 372 and 401, you'll see the similarities, and you'll also see how 401 inherently Christianizes the concept. So this is the original version singing about Yahweh. And the tune is really stirring. It's in a minor key and very dramatic, and it is still sung, a very similar version of the tune sung in many synagogues today. You'll hear on the last verse that the organ goes a little crazy. You know I do that from time to time. And those of you who are musical will hear that some of the harmonies are different on the last verse. I do this from time to time. It's a common practice for organists. It's called a free harmonization, where you change the harmonies on the last stanza to sort of bring about the climactic nature. And this particular harmonization was by a mentor of mine, Paul Halley, who was for many years organist at St. John the Divine in New York, and also a fabulous jazz musician. So you'll be able to pick up on some of those great jazz harmonies in the last stanza.
Who was and is Lord.